There's nothing historians like doing more than dispelling myths or kind of countering stereotypes, I suppose. There's this whole idea of witchcraft. I think there's two things that come together here. There's one kind of more general one, that the Middle Ages and witchcraft are linked. That's not the case. And then I think there's a more specific one, that people who are physically different were specifically linked with witchcraft. And some of that may hold true for the 16th, 17th century, but then mainly because it's a coincidence, there's no kind of direct link, no correlation. But if I start off with witchcraft in general, the idea that it's the Middle Ages where they persecute witches, and hundreds of thousands of innocent victims were tied to the stake and burnt, there is just no evidence for that. The Middle Age, if I take the Middle Ages as finishing around 1500, certainly with Martin Luther and the Reformation, you could argue the Middle Ages definitely ended. Some people would say they ended with Columbus discovering America in 1492, but around 1500 is a nice agreement. So what about all those centuries before then? Well, people were burnt at the stake, but they were people regarded as heretics. So the medieval church was far more worried about people who go round and who try and get other people to have certain beliefs, which falls under heresy. And the medieval church was hardly concerned about an individual person, far less some poor little elderly woman in a village in the middle of nowhere, who may have had the odd herbal potion, which is the stereotype of the witch. So that depiction of the elderly woman wouldn't even have constituted witchcraft. So you might say the kind of crime against humanity was the burning of heretics, but there were very, very few accusations of witchcraft. There are a couple of odd cases, maybe every couple of decades, and then they cover men as much as women. And not all these witches were burnt either. Sometimes people were imprisoned, and sometimes people just had to pay a fine. So this whole notion of witchcraft really takes off after the Reformation. There's an excellent book by a chap called Keith Thomas, Religion and the Decline of Magic. It was written in the 1970s, and one of the key ideas in this book is that under the old Catholic Church system, magic was actually almost part of everyday religion. Keith Thomas spoke of the magic of the Catholic and the medieval church. So people doing ritual actions were not that unusual. Now, all this seems to change with Protestantism, with the Reformation. So that's when the persecution of witches takes off. And it's interesting, for the 16th and the 17th centuries, which are post-medieval, and where you look at those areas where large numbers of people, and yes, mainly women, were burnt, they tend to be in the Protestant areas. And if you think of, one of the most famous cases in the 17th century are the so-called Salem witch trials in North America. And that's 1690s, I think, and an absolute heartland of Protestantism. So I think we need to forget the idea of witches in the Middle Ages. Heretics, yes, but witches, no. Now, even if you then take the idea of the witch, there's nothing in the Middle Ages that links a person's appearance with whether or not they are a witch. So this idea of the witch being female, being elderly, and being either physically disabled or looking disfigured, I actually think that it's more of a creation of the Brothers Grimm and kind of 19th century romanticism and the sort of stories that start getting told than it is anything to do with the situation in the Middle Ages. there's a far greater tolerance for the variety of human appearance and of human difference in the Middle Ages, because accidents can befall absolutely anybody, and the after effects of an accident in a time when there was not the same level of medical care, and I think crucially not the same level of surgery as we have now, meant that all kinds of people had some physical difference. Yeah? From kings right down to the lowest peasant or the lowest beggar. And I think this idea of physical perfection is something that's ingrained in our modern society, and seeing it as very negative to have a physical difference, I think, is more a sign of our modern times than it is of the Middle Ages.